So I'm reading Words of Radiance. I'm now on page 814. And in this last section, we have had some huge progressions and regressions. We've had Kaladin and one of the most awesome scenes, in fact, maybe two of the most awesome scenes. One, why he's discovering more about his powers on his own and he's getting more explorative. And the second one, where he drops one of the greatest lines potentially in all of fantasy before going into the arena and being a hero. So we're going to talk about that, of course. And then we also have quite a lot with Shallan as well. Shallan is doing arguably a lot more exploring with her powers. She's in and out of Amaram's lair, making discoveries and really pushing the limits of what her and Patton are able to do. In this section, I'm going to talk about all that's happened, some of my predictions moving forward, and I feel like we're about to begin the Shens Departure. I think I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book. I'm just trying to look at the book and judge on the pages. So this could be a long one because everything is set up to fall. In Sanderson style, he's set up the dominoes. Each domino, depending on what way it falls, could touch probably like 3 different ones because the story's all interwoven like this. We just, we just need to figure out which direction the first domino is going to fall, and then we will have a better idea of what direction our Shens Departure is going to plummet down the mountain. So let's talk about it. So I'm going to start with Kaladin. The first thing I want to say is it feels like Kaladin is getting a bit sloppy in things that I don't feel like, well, I say he's getting sloppy. There are certain things that he's letting pass that I don't think he should let pass. So Lopen's endless cousins just joining the units, I don't think that makes very much sense. He lets Shen, whose real name is not Shen, obviously. Shen's like trying to tell him something and he cuts him off and is like, no, I need to go do this. We already discussed the Moash situation, which is ridiculous. There's a period of time where he's walking through Sadeas' army and he sees Sadeas' army like getting ready for something, and like there's just so much that he just lets slide because I don't think he's doing the job he should be doing. He's very focused on his bodyguard job, but that's not who he's going to be long term. And Syl knows it, and I think deep down Kaladin knows it as well. It's not what he's best at. He's supposed to protect, yes, but I just don't think being a bodyguard is how he's supposed to protect. So I think where he's about to have, well, I already know he's about to have a terrible time because of how this section ends, but I think it's going to get worse and worse until he kind of admits who he is and what he should be. And I think all of these things that he's letting slide are going to contribute to it. And what I mean by that is I think he's missed a lot of the spies that maybe Sadeas has managed to put into his camp, or the Ghost Bloods, or literally anybody else, because he just seems to allow anybody to wander in and he's okay with it, which is strange, right? So Kaladin's getting sloppy and it's all going to come back to bite him. And before things kick off at 100 miles an hour, we do get some very obvious foreshadowing. So we have, I believe it's Rock telling a story, and it's a very interesting story about, I think it's the mountain, the wood, and the sea gods. And I have suspicion that these are actually just big spren, because mountain, woods, I think it was, and sea doesn't add up to the 3 shards that I believe, well, it's 3 and 3, but I just don't think that those correlate with the 3 shards very well. So I think they're probably more like what I think the Stormfather which is just a big spren. But anyway, so Rock's telling this story, and he also tells a story about this like pool or lake that you're not really meant to go in, if I'm not mistaken, but he went in it. He had a conversation with somebody who told him to go and do this and that person sounded suspiciously like Wit or Hoyd or Drifter. So if I'm not mistaken, and that was Drifter, and the foreshadowing, the reason I say it's foreshadowing is Kaladin clearly has a lust to go to that pool, because it says that whatever's in there, I can't remember what it is, but whatever's in there will give you something or tell you something. I should have made better notes at that point, but my prediction is that Kaladin definitely ends up in that pool at some point. But anyway, back to what I was saying, it looks like Hoyd has had a hand in Bridge Team 4 coming together, because we already know his interactions with Kaladin, even though they're a bit more recent. We also know that, of course, he had a lot of interactions with Sigzil, because he was almost like an apprentice to him, and Sigzil seems to know a lot of the world. And I think there's a lot more to that story. I also think, slash, if I'm correct now, know that Rock was interacted with as well. So maybe it will come to light that more and more of them were kind of brought together to push Kaladin in the right direction and have the people around him that he needs, and their lives have been touched by Hoyt, potentially. So one of the big things that I said was very sloppy by Kaladin was the Shen situation. Kaladin has done right by Shen, it would appear, other than stripping down his brethren and using the bones as bait against his own army. But if you look past that, which is probably quite difficult for Shen, he's been quite honourable. He's given him a spear. He's treated him like an equal, like a free human or free man or free Parshendi, Parshman. So Shen tries to tell him something. Kaladin cuts him off, and then in a later scene, Shen's like, "My name is not Shen. It's something different. It is Relaine." And he says, "I have to go. I can't tell you where I'm going." And Kaladin is like, "Yeah, no worries. See you later." That seems ridiculous because I know Kaladin's got a lot on his mind, but that is the only Parshman that he knows, and they're fighting against Parshman. And it's not like Kaladin doesn't know about, I think he knows about the meeting that Adolin had. He might not at that point, to be fair. But either way, it's ridiculous he didn't ask any questions. Now, initially I thought this was going to be a really bad thing. I thought Shen is going back because it's about to go down, and it is about to go down. Whatever is going to happen with the Parshendi and the countdown from, well, we found out the countdown is actually from Dalinar, but we'll talk about that later. That is something I guessed, by the way, which I think was quite obvious. So initially I thought that was going to be bad. But I think that Shen going back can only be good for two reasons. Number one, he will of course be a champion, not necessarily for the Alethi or humans, but for Kaladin. Surely he will report back the kind of man Kaladin is. And I think that maybe being around Kaladin changed Shen, maybe snapped him out of the form that he's in, because he's supposed to be in a similar form to the rest of the Parshmen, right? But he doesn't seem like that by the end. He seems a lot more self-thinking. So maybe the honor of Kaladin rubbed off on him, helped him move his way towards a new form, potentially. I don't know, just spitballing here. The second thing, which I think is much more interesting and more likely to have an impact on the story, is that if he had been summoned back because it was go time to wipe out the Alethi, surely all the other Parshmen would have gone as well. So I think it's free will, and I think he's going back to not necessarily help all humans, but because he knows what's going to happen and he wants to help Kaladin, or maybe with this new emotion or things that he's learned this from Kaladin, potentially, he wants to go back and share that. Either way, I think it's a good thing that he left after I thought about it. So my prediction here is undoubtedly Shen plays a big deal in saving Kaladin and the decision-making of the Parshmen and Parshendi moving forwards. And throughout this story, I've been much more impressed with how Shallan has explored her powers in comparison to Kaladin. And obviously Kaladin didn't have all the freedom to be able to do that when he was in Bridge Team 4, but he only really started doing that in this section, and it was amazing. His ability to fly, dancing around the heavens, like that's going to be so useful, and I feel like he's going to have to use that ability to fly in this book. But to travel a really long distance, I think he needs to go somewhere really quickly to stop something happen. And it'll probably be, he's stuck in his cell, which we'll talk about how he gets there, because it's amazing. So he's stuck in his cell, maybe something happens in the middle of the Shattered Plains and he manages to break out of his cell and he has to fly there really quickly to fix something. So reading flying always sounds so much fun. Whenever you read someone's ability to fly, I do get a bit jealous. And I can't wait to watch him use that ability to fight. And the next time he battles Zeph is going to be incredible, because Zeph will not be ready, well, probably won't be ready for Kaladin to have similar abilities to him. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. So Adolin has been duped. He's battling against 4 full shard bearers, or maybe 3 full shard bearers, and 1 person with the big hammer. Ranarin's in there, doing nothing, just distracting one person, barely. And we'll talk about Ranarin because he's frustrated me, bless him. And he says, I think Dalinar says, does nobody have honor? And Kaladin says, honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do. And that is such a good line. It's such a Kaladin line. And it's important because I'm pretty sure Dalinar knows that honor, the Almighty, is actually dead. Like, he knows that from his visions. So that's an interesting one. Like, it's a double meaning to Dalinar. Not that I think he actually thought of that, but I thought that was very cool. He jumps into the arena, and between the abilities of him, which are incredible, but then also Adolin, like, is really becoming his father's son with regards to his fighting ability, at least. They perform what can only be described as a military miracle, it seems, and they almost get on the cusp of trapping Sadeas and Amaram into a battle then and there. And I was cheering for Kaladin. I was like, yes, perfect. Amaram and Sadeas ready to go. I didn't even think that was going to be problematic. And then boom, Kaladin's arrested, and the plan has fallen apart pretty quickly. And he's now in prison. And this is terrible. The reason it's terrible is he's in prison, which sucks because he was a slave and imprisoned before. But there's so much that could still go wrong for him while he's in prison that doesn't require him to make any more mistakes. People could find out that he knew about Moash. Shallan could find out that actually it was Kaladin that killed her brother. And Kaladin can't be blamed for that, logically, but that's not going to be a very logical conversation. But I have more to say about that because I think that's going to be really important. And then I believe his lackadaisical attitude towards how many random people were joining the crew could end up that some of those people were spies, and those spies may kill one of the people that he's supposed to be bodyguarding, and it just could go terribly. Like, his positioning isn't great now. The king has imprisoned him, but he could end up in a much worse position before he manages to get out. So I do want to really briefly talk about Ranarin. He must be good at something, right? Like, he can't just bumble through this story, because Adolin gave a masterclass and Ranarin gave a truly a disaster class. Like, and I just feel for the guy. So he must be a hero somehow, some way, at something, even if it's just one scene. And I couldn't even hazard a guess as to what it would be. But I'm just hoping he gets a little bit of redemption. It's painful. It's painful to watch him go through the way he's going through, basically. So yeah, there's my little bit of please, Sanderson, give Ranarin something. Outside of that, how satisfactory was Amaram's face when Kaladin called him out? The fear. Sadeas's was good, pretty sweet, but Amaran's was amazing. So good, he thought it was over for him, and when he realized who Kaladin was, incredible scenes. I think what's certain with his storyline moving forward is he's definitely going to hit his next level of oaths, because even Syl said, like, you're kind of ready. And I don't know, I'm torn between what's going to happen next. I'm torn between whether he's going to have like a bit of like a spiritual arc inside the prison, going through some self-development and self-learning and trying to impact things from in there, and knowing he can break out most likely because of his abilities, and deciding not to because of his principles and having honor. And maybe that's what brings him to the next oath level, is his principles and his honor from being inside on principle. Or something completely different could happen. Civil war could break loose. I don't think we're very far from civil war. That could break loose, and that could require and need Kaladin to bust out of there, fly to the center of the Shattered Plains where everything's happening, and to hit the next level of oaths and to defeat Zeph or something along those lines. Not that I think he'll kill Zeph. I think Zeph's here for the long haul. He's going to be a main character. So I'm torn, but some way, somehow, he needs to take the next oaths. And I don't know what that's going to do to his abilities. I don't know how that affects it. Maybe it unlocks more, potentially. I'm just not certain how that works, but I'm truly buzzing for Kaladin's storyline long term. Short term, I think it's going to be pretty painful. So let's talk about Syl. Syl gives some good clues. First thing is, Syl and Patton both giving a ton of hints about Shardblades. I don't know what a Shardblade is, but I think the hints lead towards the Shardblade being closely tied to Spren. I think, because the hints they give point in that direction. And the final straw was when he does the grab thing that the Swordmaster Zahel mentions. He gives it a name when they say that Dalinar did it. But anyway, when he grabs the sword, he hears like screaming. And the reason why I think the Shardblade might be Spren related is I think that screaming is maybe, if it was a Spren, Kaladin has a Spren inside of him. So surely a Spren in like an honor blade, in a Shardblade, or like something made by Spren wouldn't want to destroy something that has a Spren in it, which is Kaladin. So maybe that's what the scream was. That's the only thing I could guess from the screaming noise from when he grabbed it. So that's my guess. We also learn from Syl that Zeph's blade gives him some of his powers. So I think we confirmed there that he does have an honor blade, which is what we thought, because the Azish man at the start mentions that that creature has our master's blade, and I think he's referring to Zeph. So his master must be maybe a herald. Anyway, I've talked about that before, but I think that's confirmed now that Zeph has an honor blade rather than a shard blade. On to Shallan. I think Patton is awesome. Patton, I think on a day-to-day basis is much more useful, obviously, than Syl. Obviously, powers aside, like the powers that they give aside, because they're both awesome and they can't really be compared because it's very different. And Syl did a lot for Kaladin. Like, I think she protected him on the battlefield absolutely loads, which is great because it literally kept him alive. But that was a much more trying scenario, not a scenario that I feel like you'd find yourself in all the time, unless you're Kaladin, in which case you do. But Patton has a bunch of abilities. Number one, his ability to decode things. That's incredible. He's decoding things that have confused the human race for a really long time, like the script. I forgot the name of the script, but the script. He also is able to unlock things. Not only can he decode like languages and learn those, he seems to be able to notice patterns because his name is Patton, and he can go out there and throw his voice and copy voices, and like he just seems like the perfect accomplice, especially for Shallan. But that's obvious, right? Like, of course he's the perfect accomplice because he's the Spren that chose her, so her powers complement him perfectly. But I just think on a day-to-day basis, Patton would be awesome, and I very much like his personality as well. Not that I don't like Syl's. Syl's is awesome, but I enjoy any scene that Patton is in. He also gives us a massive clue that Shallan did soulcast a long time ago, and I made a guess that I think she like soulcast her mother because she always talks about her mum's soul. I feel like maybe that's what happened when I believe she killed her own mother, and that's what a lot of this book is leading up towards, is that reveal, and then she'll take the first oath because she's given a truth or something along those lines. Because he says, she mentions something about the first time she uses Stormlight, and he says, but that's not the first time we lose Stormlight. First time we lose Stormlight, and then she kind of ignores him and cuts him off, and that perfectly aligns with what I thought. So I'm hoping that I've made a really good guess there. And there was a period in this book where I really wasn't starting to like Shallan. I think it was basically when she got washed up, and then that period of time where her situation is pretty desperate, which goes to show you what kind of friend am I, you know, when she's down in the dirt and has to do what she has to, I'm looking down on her. But when she was hanging out with Tyn, and I couldn't really tell the difference between who Shallan was and who she was pretending to be, and I decided I didn't like her very much at that moment, even though I had liked her for most of the previous book. Now I'm very impressed with her. I love how she's experimenting with her powers. I love how proactive she is to getting things done. And most of all, and I'm very surprised to say this, I really like her relationship with Adolin. I think it's a breath of fresh air because, yes, she's trying to get something out of him, but she seems to genuinely enjoy being with him. He genuinely enjoys being with her, and instead of silly little love games, they are actually pushing towards a goal together and utilizing their might and complementing each other. And it's just so refreshing to see that, especially inside of a fantasy setting. And maybe we get a lot of friction between them, and maybe it ends in heartbreak, and maybe this is just, you know, a brief flash in the pan. But I've enjoyed that relationship. I think that's, like I said, just refreshing to read. They're not hindering each other's stories. In fact, they're complementing each other and pushing each other in the right direction without loads of friction. So well done there. And we get the whole spy scene, and I love a good spy scene. Some of my favorite movies are spy movies like Cold War style and things like that, using their brains and intelligence to hoodwink someone else. And that whole scene was a lot of fun, where she speaks with, I think it's like the cook and the guard, and she uses her abilities to manipulate people's ideas of what's happened. She gets in the room and there's maps everywhere. And not only can she draw the maps, she is able to record down all the things that are written on there. And she kind of comes to the conclusion that Amaram is trying to bring the Voidbringers back. And then Amaram is appointed head of the Knights Radiance, which is going to be Kaladin's eventual role. Definitely, has to be. So why does he want to bring the Voidbringers back? This is a tough question, because as far as I know, bringing the Voidbringers back and bringing the Knights Radiance back are the same thing. I feel like they are the same thing. You can't seem to have one without the other. It all kind of like comes at the same time. So I have no idea what the actual end motive is there, but obviously none of us like Amaram, so it can't be good. One thing that I think will happen though is I do think that Shallan will find the evidence to prove that Amaram doesn't deserve the Shardblade. And whilst doing that, which potentially frees Kaladin now I think about it, but whilst doing that, she probably figures out that Kaladin did kill her brother himself. So that'll be a very interesting and conflicting moment, where she maybe frees Kaladin and has the information to free him, but would also be doing the right thing by doing that, but also freeing her brother's murderer. So yeah, that's definitely the kind of thing I could see Sanderson writing, and it's definitely lined up for that. That will be good. The big thing though is, where did she get her Shardblade? I thought that she got her Shardblade from some kind of scene where her dad kills her brother and then she kills her dad, but obviously not, because her brother still had the Shardblade and her brother didn't die in that family setting at all. So I have no idea where she got her Shardblade from. I was trying to think back, and I must have missed some big clues potentially, but that's exciting. So I get to have a surprise at least, because I thought I had that one all figured out. And I can't really remember the description of her Shardblade either. I'd have to look back and look through it, but I'm looking forward to figuring out what I haven't figured out and what I've missed. So she gets this information, and then she goes back and meets with Mraize again. And this is a really interesting conversation. First of all, Mraize calls her child, which would suggest maybe he's either really old, which I think we already know, or he's an Ardent, which would be very interesting. So is there a chance? Well, no, maybe not. Well, potentially he could be an Ardent anyway. More importantly, we get more and more clues that there are people from off-world, because they say things like the humans on this planet. Do they say planet? The local species, they say. They talk about a creature in Takar. They talk about several things which gives the impression that there are people from off-planet. And this is great and slightly worrying. And the reason it's great is, obviously I knew that the Cosmere is connected, and it has to start connecting to each other at some point, and that's amazing. The thing that's slightly worrying is there's so many characters to remember and so many small details, and I just feel like the wider this world gets, the less good I'm going to get at trying to figure out what's happening, and not even predicting forwards, just remembering what I should already know, because there's just so much to cram in there. We have different worlds. Obviously we have Scadrial, which was, although I say quite often I much prefer Stormlight Archive to Mistborn, and the characters in Mistborn weren't my favourite, even though I did very much like Kelsier, and I quite liked the Lord Ruler as well, which was controversial. Scadrial is an amazing planet, so how do those cross over? How do the magic systems cross over? I don't know. How would Stormlight do against somebody, using the metal abilities of Scadrial. I have no idea. I don't know if there would be a massive advantage to one or the other. And then also we have the world where Warbreaker was set. I did notice some similarities in Warbreaker, so I'm reaching a bit here, but in Warbreaker, the more breaths you had, you were able to get like new abilities, kind of like what it feels like we're doing with the Oaths leveling up. So that is a bit of a stretch, but anyway, I'm excited that everything is connecting together. I haven't noticed anyone except for Hoyd, and then someone mentioned that Nazh, Nazh, was someone that we met before, and I remembered that is actually from the Secret History. So basically, I have no idea how all these worlds connect together. I've probably missed a lot of connecting things, but I'm excited that they're connecting, and also a little bit nervous that I'm going to miss so much because it's just so detailed, basically. So happy and worried. For example, Shallan hugs the wit. I can't remember when her and Hoyd met. It must have been obviously in this book. Was that the person at the fair? I truly can't remember. So if that's not a spoiler, someone let me know in the comments. If it is a spoiler, obviously don't put it in the comments. But yeah, I just cannot remember where they met each other, and I think I'm just blanking. What next for Shallan? Well, the main thing is, obviously she poisons her father, and I don't blame her. Her father's storyline is truly heartbreaking because although he's become a truly despicable person and angry and mad, he's descended into madness, and you can see it. It's almost like two people in there. He's trying to deal with all of his problems with just anger, and surprise, surprise, that doesn't work. But it also stems from something that I don't think was his fault, which is trying to protect his daughter because his daughter murdered his mother, and he has to kind of deal with the blame for that, even though it wasn't his fault. So do I think that we should show him mercy? No, he's descended into madness. He's dealt with this in a terrible manner, but I also do feel some pity for him. But yeah, obviously the foreshadowing here is that she poisons her father. I don't think there's anything else that can happen based on the little flashback that we got from 3 years ago with the poisonous leaf that her brother gave to her. So that's a pretty straightforward one. Dalinar is doing the numbers himself. Initially I didn't think that, but the more we got those scenes, the more I realized he's the only one who could be doing it. My guess was maybe the countdown is coming from our side. Maybe Dalinar's going to do something, or maybe... And he did bring up a good point, Dalinar did. He brought up a point and he said, like, it's weird, why wouldn't the Almighty just tell him in a vision what was going to happen and what the numbers were? And he does all this when he's blacked out from the storms. So maybe it's the Stormfather, which I think is a big spren, trying to give him a message rather than the Almighty. But obviously I'm not really sure. So we'll see. And with Dalinar, like, I think Adolin is doing a really good job stepping into his father's shoes, at least in a combat role. I very much hope we don't lose Dalinar anytime soon. I think he's an amazing character, especially from the Way of Kings. Like, he's a hero. But Adolin is showing signs of being able to step into his father's shoes. And Adolin is much more likable. He is building solid links with other characters that are really important, namely Shallan and Kaladin. They're coming to terms with each other, especially Shallan. He goes and meets Eshonai. That meeting is pretty rough. Eshonai is not interested. You can tell she's completely under the spell of whichever spren has entered her. It seemed like a hatred spren or an anger spren or an unreasonable spren at least. So, and I think the solution to that, and I've made this guess a few times, I think the solution to that is our Radiance. I think, because it was said that spren can go into the Parshendi. It was said that, but they just don't for some reason, and I can't remember why. But obviously the answer is we need to get a spren into Eshonai, and I think we can do that with the teachings of, I think Shallan's drawing and things like that is going to be really important, because we had some scenes with the Parshendi trying to draw and get creation sprints, so I think that's going to be pretty key. Yeah, obviously the answer to the Parshendi's woes is that they are able to get good spread inside of them, but I don't know what the opposite forces of that. I don't know if there's a reaction to that, so we shall see. What else? Well, the head notes seem to be describing all of the Knights Order, and I've kind of given up with trying to decode the head notes because I've never really managed to do it with a bunch of success. So I've just decided to enjoy those because they give you so much information, yet I can't glean how they affect the story. So I'm just enjoying learning about all the different Radiants. So I'm probably missing some huge clues there, but you can't always be trying to focus on what's going to happen next. You just gotta sometimes say, the author is much smarter than I, and I'm just going to enjoy those bits. But learning about the lore and the different types of order of Knights Radiance is a lot of fun. Also, Hoid. I don't know what Hoid's overall motive is. It seems good, but why? Who is he? How is he different to Shards? I don't know the answer to any of these questions, but it's going to be a very interesting story when we get more shading on his story. So that's going to be great. And then also the name of the city that I always get wrong, Urutheru. Shallan starts to think it's some kind of, not portal, but kind of like a portal. And it was mentioned before, and I just thought that Urutheru is, I think I pronounced it correctly, is under the Shattered Plains, and I kind of accepted that. But it was mentioned at some point that the Heralds, or the Knights Radiant, I can't remember, shattered the plains, the Shattered Plains. Why did they want to do that? Why would they want to shatter the ability to get to Urutheru, etc.? What demons and evils are on the other side of this portal? Maybe that's a quick way to get to the other worlds, like Scadrial, etc. Why would they shatter it? Maybe to stop the Voidbringers going across to the other worlds. This is a good idea. I need to think about this. Hopefully, yeah, I'm gonna flesh that idea out, but I like that idea. Also, really quickly back to Hoid. He mentions there's only one woman as old as him around here. And I don't know if that would maybe be like cultivation, or if there's some other character more local in the Shattered Plains that's ancient as well. If I had to guess, it would be Moraze's little dark-eyed lady with the mask on next to him, because she creeps me out and she definitely gives vibes of being really old. So what next? Sadeas and Amaram, they need to act. And I think this section finished with Sadeas's admission to himself that he's basically evil. And he's kind of been lying to himself up until this point as to what his motives are and yada yada, but really he just wants to crush his enemies. And I think that was a really good way to end that part, like some self-reflection from the bad guy. So that doesn't often happen. Normally they're just completely convinced that they're doing good. But yeah, that was good. What's Sadeas going to do? Something political, obviously. For some reason, I think Sadeas makes it out at the end of the book. Don't think Amaram does. I think Amaram dies, is murdered, hopefully by Kaladin, and Kaladin takes on the leader of the Knights Radiance mantle. Sadeas, I think, he's just cunning and a survivor. So I think he may break the Alethi kingdom in half. And this guess isn't off of intuition. It's just because I know there's going to be 10 books. And the Alethi seem to be extremely important to this whole process. I just don't think a unified Alethi happens in the second book. I think what's going to happen is Sadeas is going to split them in half, and maybe there's an ongoing waging war. But I don't know exactly how he's going to do that. But they have to act. Those two need to make moves now because of the embarrassment of what happened before. They so nearly were called out onto the field, and you'd have to guess they would have lost that battle, because Kaladin's like our main character and he's awesome, and Adolin clearly seems to be the best duelist. So those two are on the ropes, it's their move and the ball is in their court. So I'm loving this book, it's been amazing. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe, because it massively helps the channel and it shows, I think it makes the video appear to more people. More importantly, send it to someone else who you know loves this series, because we'd love to have them along. I'll see you next time.